Hello everyone, welcome back to another deck profile with me, Chocobilly, and this week I am going to be looking at a card I've kind of half covered but also haven't covered, Tulien from Opus 21. So they are a 3 CP 7k warrior forward. If a forward you control deals battle damage to a forward, the damage increases by 2000 instead, and pay 0, choose one forward. Until the end of the turn, it gains this forward must attack once per turn if possible, and this forward must block if possible. You can only use ability once per turn. You can use it on both your turn and your opponent's turn, which is pretty cool. We've seen cards that do similar sort of things, but normally it's one or the other, have to attack or have to block, not both, which is really cool. And then increasing the damage that a forward deals as well is really nice. Obviously, it's only the forwards you control, so that's beneficial. And they are a warrior, which means that's even harder to kill because you've got things like Have and Tyvas to play him onto the field and search and play him onto the field, and then you've got things like yours. So yeah, I've made the warrior deck anyway. Let's talk about how you can best utilize its abilities. So first up we have Antlion. This is quite a fun one. So when a backup enters or leaves your field, it becomes a forward with 9k power, and when Antlion is dealt damage, choose up to one forward your opponent controls. Deal it the same amount of damage. This effect will only trigger once per turn. So probably more likely to be happening on your turn. You play a backup onto the field, or break one or return one to your hand, whatever. Antlion becomes a forward, you attack, force your opponent to block. That forward will probably die because Antlion is a 9k, and then any damage that Antlion receives, you can then pack onto some other forward as well. So if Antlion is hit by an 8k, and your opponent has another 8k or something smaller, you can then hit that one as well and kill 2 birds with 1 Antlion. Not too bad. Durando. So, forcing your opponent to have to attack, so that way they don't have blockers for when you go swinging with Durando, is the idea here. A bit of a weird one, I know. But ultimately it means that, you know, your Durando is able to get through, and your opponent has to start playing even more cards out of the hand to stop Durando from actually dealing the damage. And, you know, ultimately you attack with Durando, you force maybe a smaller forward to block as well. Durando will be dealing a bit more damage as well. Yeah, there's certain things you can do there. Bismarck. You force your, or you either block or force your opponent to block. Use Bismarck, half that forward's power. It's now probably going to die. Tulien, the Impure. So it might be that your opponent has some horrible, or your opponent's forwards have some horrible abilities, and you want to make sure that they're killed. You Tulien to get rid of those abilities. You force it to attack, and then you block and kill it. Now, what you actually have to do is use Tulien, make sure that resolves, so it loses all its abilities, and then use Tulien. Because if you use Tulien first, let that resolve, and then cast Tulien, Tulien will then blank the effect that Tulien has bestowed upon that forward. So Tulien first, let it resolve, then Tulien, force the attack, block with said forward, kill said forward. Or obviously you can force it to block as well if you wanted to. Porum, basically the same as either Bismarck or Tulien. You're able to blank a forward, very, very nice. Obviously it's more frequent as well because you can do it every turn, just easier to kill. And then also, if Porum sticks around long enough, you can also start setting forwards to 1 CP as well, which, given the fact that you can use both Porum and Tulien on both your turns and opponent's turns, your opponent can be playing forwards, or obviously they need to have haste to be able to have to attack, but your opponent can be playing forwards your turn, make them have to block, set them to 1k, lose abilities, and then they might have forwards that can attack on their turn, make them attack, set them to 1k, lose abilities. So yeah, these two are a horrible combination together. Yeah, make sure to subscribe, makes a big difference to the channel. I'm also doing a Final Fantasy TCG new threat mod playthrough at the moment, which is like the OG Final Fantasy VII, but it adds some new story elements to it, or it changes, not changes story, but it reworks the story a little bit, changes the way certain characters interact, and it also changes a lot of the bosses as well. I'm currently at the Temple of the Ancients, about to do the Demon Wall boss, and it turns out there are 2 demon walls, and you're like sandwiched between them 2. And yeah, that's going to be interesting, but there's some really, really cool differences in that mod for the game. It just changes the way the game works entirely, and actually makes it so that characters have kind of classes as well. So yeah, make sure to check out stuff like that as well, because I do lots of Let's Plays for different Final Fantasies. I try to do challenge runs, like the Final Fantasy X, no Aeons, no Overdrives, no Sphere Grid, and Initial Equipment Only run, which was a lot of fun. Actually, it was a lot of fun. Really, really, really hard, but a lot of fun. So, yeah, make sure to subscribe. That way you get to see all that stuff, and make sure to like, because it means that my stuff actually gets discovered more. So, thank you. Left ear. So, if a fire summon or a fire character you control deals damage to a forward, the damage increases by 2000 instead. Obviously, Tulien is already increasing damage that, or battle damage that forwards deal. Actually, yeah, it's battle damage. Just had to make sure. With left tier, that means that damage is now increased by 4,000 as well. So that's pretty good. You could be blocking with a 5k and it's dealing 9k something. Now, you throw Squall into the mix and you've got a hell of a fun time. So you attack with Squall, he'll deal 6k to the opponent's board with left tier on the field, but then force a block with Tulien. All of a sudden, you're dealing 12k or 2 packets of 6k to your opponent's board. That's pretty rancid. Probably going to end up with a board wipe. Now, obviously, lefty is pretty easy to kill. I mean, everything on the field is fairly easy to kill. But if you are in a position where you can play Squall into the field with haste and you've just got lefty and Tulien, and your opponent can't do anything before you can attack, goodbye board. Now, admittedly, this is a bit of a weird one to throw in there, but, you know, you're an Earth. You could be running Chivalry and... you could be running Tyro or some form of multi-element to be able to cast Chivalry out of the blue. Get it? Because ice is blue coloured, themed, whatever. Anyway, yeah, so Squall board wiping your opponent, but then Chivalry on top of that, meaning that your opponent would have to discard a card for every forward that Squall has killed, is pretty brutal. And given that left tier, Squall is probably going to kill the board, forcing the block of Tulien. That's a lot of fun. Obviously, Chivalry actually just works quite nicely. In fact, you don't even really need left ear for this. Squall dealing 8k to the board, still probably going to kill a lot of stuff. Left ear is just a nice way to be able to compound that. But Chivalry just with Tulien is also pretty good as well, because force an attack, block with something small, Chivalry to make it bigger, kill that thing, make your opponent discard a card. But similarly, forcing a block as well with Chivalry means you're going to kill something, and you get to make your opponent discard. Tomberry. Tomberry becomes a forward with 2,000 power, and when Tomberry deals damage to a forward, break it. Can use ability once per 10. Obviously, Tomberry can be, well, is pretty small though, so make sure that you're, well, you can't make sure the opponent has no way to kill it, but yeah, you know, make sure your opponent doesn't have a way of killing him, basically, because you discard a card, comes to 2k, they could then easily just, you know, steal him 2k and kill him. So yeah, make sure that Tomberry deals damage to something. Tulien obviously can force a block, force the attack, whatever, kill it with Tomberry. Behemoth K. So this Tulien works nicely with Behemoth K for two different reasons. Obviously, when Behemoth K attacks, it gains plus 2,000 power until turn, and when it will deal your opponent 1 point of damage. But at damage 5, it also gains haste, and when Behemoth K is blocked, Behemoth K deals your opponent 1 point of damage as well. So when he attacks, he already becomes a 12k. That's pretty good. Tulien will mean that he's actually dealing 14k something. That's just brutal. But the problem with something like Behemoth K is that your opponent never takes you to 5 damage. But with Tulien, you can force them to take you to 5 damage. So you can actually be using Tulien to make your opponent hit you to a damage point they actually want to get to. And obviously damage 5 is kind of scary because that's fairly late in the game. So you want to make sure that you have a means about coming back from this, but Behemoth K is exactly that. So then attacking with Behemoth K, or, you know, let's say you force your opponent to attack with a forward, take you to 5 damage. And then you go to your turn, attack with Behemoth K, or you play Behemoth K from your hand onto the field, has haste, gains plus 3k, deals a point of damage, opponent blocks, deals another point of damage. You've got rid of one of their forwards and dealt them 2 points of damage. Nice. Estinian, similar sort of thing. Well, not really a similar sort of thing, but ultimately you can force your opponent to block when Estinian attacks. If he's blocked, kill the blocking forward. So he doesn't even receive damage from that forward, he just kills it, which is really good. But then ultimately you can pay 1 lightning to activate him again and attack once more. So it's not too bad. Preesh. Super old school card, but I just thought I'd throw it in because he's good for blocking. When Preesh blocks, Preesh gains plus 4,000 power until the end of the turn. So force your opponent to block a Preesh, he becomes 12k, probably kills the forward. Snow, again. Opus 1S cards. What have I done? When Snow blocks, choose one forward, dull it. Actually not that bad, because let's say you attack you make your opponent attack with a forward, you block with Snow, dull something else out of the way. Snow might survive, he's only 7k, so probably won't. But ultimately, you've managed to dull out 2 of your opponent's forwards. I mean, if you're running ice, you've got easier ways of dulling out 2 things, probably. But still, it's a good way to be able to reliably use Tulien alongside Snow. Poppy. So obviously the wind forwards you control gain. This forward cannot be blocked by forwards that cost 3 or more, but they can be blocked by 2 or less. So using Tulien to force your opponent to attack with their smaller forwards, meaning that cards like Poppy and the likes of those cards can actually then swing through without being blocked, is very useful. And Tulien will gain plus 1,000 power and brave from Poppy as well. So it means that if you force your opponent to attack with a 2 CP forward, but actually it's still an 8k, Tulien's an 8k, increases damage by 2k as well. So, you know, Tulien will be killing that forward as well. Marlborough. So, during your turn, Marlborough also becomes a forward with 6,000 power, so it doesn't work to force your opponent to attack. But on the block, however, when Marlborough is blocked, all the forwards your opponent controls lose 2,000 power until the end of the turn. Now, Marlborough is only a 6,000 power forward, but it will deal 8 because of Tulien's effect, and your opponent, even if it's a, I don't know, 10k, its power gets reduced by 2 because of Marlborough. So Marlborough goes from dealing 6k to dealing basically 10k, which is pretty good. And again, Marlborough will, reduce the damage of all, or reduce the power of all your opponent's forwards as well. So it means that you can follow up with something else, maybe to board wipe and then kill other forwards as well. Maybe you've got 2 Marlboroughs. Maybe you attack with a party of 2 of these Marlboroughs, force your opponent to block, minus 4k to their board. That's not too shabby. Matthias the Corrupt. Choose from blocking forward, break it. Simple as that. Force a forward to block, doesn't matter what it is. Cast Matthias, choose it, kill it. Obviously, you have to make sure that you can choose the forward, or through both abilities and summons, but either way, choose the forward, break it. Nice. Sephiroth. Force your opponent to attack with a forward, then, before the damage has come through, play Sephi, kill the null forward. Simple as that, really. Firion, this is fun. So, when a forward damaged by Firion is put from the field to the break zone, on the same turn, draw 2 cards. So, just choose a forward that is, probably smaller than Firion, make it attack, block with Firion, draw 2 cards. If you finished your turn with 5 cards, immediately go into the next turn with 7, technically 9, because you then draw 2 on your opponent's turn. You could then attack with Firion on your opponent's turn, force a block through something, gain 2 more cards. So you can go technically into a turn using Firion with 4 additional cards. That's hilarious. He's a warrior as well, which means he benefits off of the warrior engine, kind of. He is searchable for Tyvas, but not playable, unfortunately. But still, getting 2 cards for killing something isn't bad, and, your opponent's probably going to be playing forwards that are smaller than Firion, so forcing them to attack, blocking with Firion, gaining 2 cards, I like the sound of it. Galoof, similar sort of thing. When a forward damaged by Galoof is put from the field into the break zone, on the same turn, gain a crystal. Not a great effect, admittedly, but still gaining a crystal more reliably using Tulien is fine. And again, he is a job warrior. So is Tulien, works nicely. Ramza, again, a job warrior. But ultimately, you can just play Ramza onto the field. If you've got a crystal, maybe you got the crystal through Galoof previously, you play Ramza onto the field, you attack because he's got haste, force your opponent to block with something, maybe it's a small forward that dies, that's fine, Ramza kills that forward, but then when Ramza is put from the field into the break zone, you then get to choose another forward and break it as well. So you can either attack with him, or you can just wait till your opponent has to attack with something, block with Ramza, kill either that forward or something else. Ravana, Savior of the Nath. So if he takes damage, the damage is reduced by 5,000 instead, and obviously increases, or Tulien increases damage dealt as well, so you've got a nice kind of 7k swing there. And then when a character is put from the field into the break zone, activate Ravana, Savior of the Nath. He can attack 4 times. You can't gain Brave, but ultimately you can attack with Ravana, force a block, reactivate Ravana, attack a second time if you wanted to. If you've got multiple means of being able to force your opponent to block through other cards as well, works very nicely with Ravana because you just keep on attacking, they keep on blocking, Ravana keeps on reactivating and keeps on killing things. Ovalia. So let's say your opponent, you force your opponent to attack with a forward. You then use Ovalia's effect on that forward. You block, it dies, comes back onto the field through Ovalia's effect, get a nice additional effect off. So, it could be, the obvious play here is Agrias, so deals minus 7k upon entry, draws you a card, and then if an FFT forward leaves the field, Ovalia obviously gets your card to hand as well. It could be the Lightning Ramza as well. When it enters the field, choose an FFT forward in the break zone, play it onto the field, and at damage 5, play it onto the field. So it normally gets it to your hand, and then can play something from your hand onto the field at damage 5. But yeah, ultimately, it's a really good ability. It's just a bit slow because you have to be kind of more FFT focused, given the fact that that's how you get the cards to their effect. But still, forcing things to be able to block or attack using the Aegis ability, you can start getting some really good abilities from entry effects for free, basically. Sid Highwind. Best card in the game. When a forward that took damage from Sid Highwind is put from the field into the break zone, on the same turn, your opponent puts the top 2 cards of his or her deck into the break zone. Maybe you have a means of giving Sid Highwind Brave so he can attack, force a block, mill them 2 cards. You can then force them to attack on their turn, block with Sid Highwind, mill them 2 cards. Seymour. So when Seymour enters the field, you may search for 1 summon and put it on top of your deck. So obviously the play here is play Seymour, EX Burst on top of your deck, force your opponent to attack on their turn, take the EX Burst. Matthias the Corrupt. Opponent puts one attacking forward into the break zone. Best thing about this is the fact that your opponent, or rather you, are not choosing a forward, so even the forward could be summon proof, doesn't matter, your opponent puts one attacking forward into the break zone. So unless they decide to party attack with something, which, you know, party attacking to definitely deal your opponent 1 point of damage is a bit of a weird one. But obviously they'll have seen you put Matthias on top of the deck, so that's the only real way that they can choose which forward is being put from the field to the break zone. But ultimately, yeah, doesn't choose, so long as you can target it through Tulien's ability, you take Matthias' point of damage, put a forward into the break zone. Odin, I mean, again, pretty simple, dealing, breaking a forward of 5 or less for an EX Burst, but also, again, like I said earlier with Behemoth K, using Tulien to get you to 5 points of damage, then Odin only costs you 2 CP to cast as well. That's quite nice. Kusith, choose a forward or backup in break zone, add it to your hand. I don't need to explain why that's a good card, but again, Seymour on top of your deck, hit it for opponent damage, get the card that's really been a pain in your opponent's arse, and replay it on your turn. Simple as. And then finally, Sky Soldier, everyone's favourite card. Dull, put Sky Soldier into the break zone, choose one forward, it gains when this forward deals battle damage to a forward, break that forward until the end of the turn. So yeah, it doesn't really matter about Tulien's damage buffing effect, as long as that forward is dealing damage to something, so kind of similar to the Tomberry earlier, it will be killing something. Forcing an attack, forcing a blocker, doesn't matter, you can use Sky Soldier whenever you want, make it so that that forward will kill the other forward. And that is it, folks, that is Tulien. There's been a lot of cards that came out of this set that have some really interesting abilities, and Tulien was one of them. When I first saw this card, I was like, I can do so much with this. And, you know, there's some lots and lots of fun things. And it being an Earth means that you can start to play around with some multi-element facets as well, like I said earlier, with Tulien, Squall, and Chivalry. So, you know, it might seem initially, just when you see those 3 cards together, a bit harder to do, but actually when you're running things like Tyro, and I've immediately forgotten the name of the card, Catchy, for 11, and then you've also got the Fire Moogle, which generates ice as well for a bit of spice, so you know there's loads of different ways of being able to play cards like that, but ultimately there's some really fun things you can do with Tulien. But I'd love to know what you guys have put Tulien with, how have you operated it. It obviously very naturally goes into a Warriors deck, but have you guys put it in something different outside of Warriors? Have you put it with like a specific card that works very nicely? Antlion personally is like the best card to work with Tulien, because you can start just board wiping very, very quickly. But anyway, that's it. Squall as well, obviously nice and easy board wipe. But thank you so much for watching, guys. Stay safe, be lucky, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.